Can we talk about the word sustainable for a few minutes? Because I think we've watered it down to the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. Sustainable used to mean something real, something you could actually build a business around. But somewhere along the line, it turned into a vibe, a hashtag, something people say in their bio right before they post at midnight because the algorithm did. Because sustainability is not a feeling, it's not an aesthetic, it's not what you call your business when you're trying to sound less hustly. Sustainability is a design decision, and most of us were never taught how to make it. So let's fix it today. Listen, I've had two very different relationships with sustainability in my business. The first one was more performative. And I talked about balance. I talk about not being burnt out. I had all the boundaries in theory, but behind the scenes, I was working in a way that was completely unsustainable. I didn't just admit it yet because the results were still coming in. And here's the thing about that season, you can go a long time being unsustainable before it catches up with you. Our bodies are so incredibly resilient, and you can push and push and push, and the work keeps getting done and the numbers keep moving. And from outside, it looks like you are striving, you are successful until one day it just stops. Not dramatically. And that's the thing that nobody tells you. It doesn't always come as a crash. Sometimes it just comes as a quiet, creeping flatness. And the next thing you know, you're waking up, and the work that used to excite you feels like an obligation. The ideas that used to flow feel like you are literally pulling teeth, and you're still showing up, but your aliveness is gone. The excitement and the joy to create and do the work is gone. And so that flatness is your body and even your mind telling you the design is broken. And that was the moment I stopped performing sustainability and I started building it. And what I found was that sustainable isn't a pace, it's not a workflow, it's not a workload, it's not even a schedule. It's an operating system and it has specific moving parts. Here's the thing. Most people when they say they want a sustainable business is that they want to work less and make the same amount. And now and hear me clearly. I'm not saying that that's wrong. Rest matters, having margin matters. Yes, but that's not actually what sustainability is. That's just a preference for less workload. Here's the real definition I want you to sit with. A sustainable creative business is one that can keep generating at the level it needs without requiring you to give more than you have. Not without requiring work, not without requiring hard seasons or difficult decisions, but requiring you to give what you don't have. The unsustainable business is one that constantly needs more from you than you can actually produce, whether that's more energy, more time, more creativity, more capacity. And so it drains you until you slowly have nothing left to give. And that's why a lot of creators are burnt out. That is why a lot of entrepreneurs just say, I'm over this. Let me go back to corporate because corporate already have a sustainable structure and you can fall into line with that. But here's the thing, the sustainable business is designed around what you actually have. It knows your real capacity. It has systems that don't break when life does, and it has margin built in for the seasons that are harder. And it also produces results without requiring you to be at 110% all the time. And so we need to get to that place where we're not lowering our standards, but we are creating a smarter design. And that is the distinction that matters. Because if you're chasing sustainability as a feeling, as something that you arrive at once you do enough of the right things, you will never get there. You're going to just putting yourself in a place where you are frustrated and burnt out and tired and you're just over it. But if you treat it as a design question, you can start building it today. So, for the last few years, I have decided that I don't want to just speak the word sustainability. It needs to be integrated and integral into everything that I create that allows me to show up. Even on the days when I can only give 50%, even on the days when I can only give 20%. And I have landed at a sweet spot where I evaluate my business that is actually sustainable or it's just running on reserves. And so this is more or less the operating system that is underneath everything that I do day in and day out in my creative business. It is that invisible architecture that determines whether the whole thing keeps running or it eventually freezes. And so the first thing for me is the capacity clarity. You cannot sustain what you haven't measured. You have heard me say this every week, or for the past couple of weeks, you've heard me saying this. If you don't measure something, if you're not paying attention to it, you can't course correct it. And so you cannot sustain what you haven't measured. Most creators are running their business on their intuition or sense of how much they can handle. And listen, the intuition is almost always very optimistic because it's calibrated to their best weeks and not their real average capacity. So what does capacity clarity means to you? It means that you know your numbers, not your revenue numbers, your energy and your time numbers. How many hours per week can you create at a high quality without feeling tired or burnt out? Not how many hours you work, but how many hours of real creative output can you produce before the quality drops? What are the days you think best? What conditions allow your best work to emerge? What depletes you faster than anything else? These are numbers and questions that you need to know off the top of your head. For example, my capacity clarity is this. First things first, I've been saying this. I am a morning person and I know that I'm most energetic and most creative at the early start of my day. So, for example, with regards to this podcast, I am up at 5 a.m. I've been up since 3 a.m. I did my devotion. I spent time with the Lord. And then about 4:30, I start getting ready so I can start recording at 5 a.m. So my golden hour in the day when it comes to creating high quality without feeling drained is between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. That is my golden hour, my peak time for creating high quality content. And so 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 2 hours, I can push in at least 2 or 3 videos, depending on my energy level, because I'm paying attention to that. That is when I know that that's my real creative output hours. And the best days for me to do this is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and sometimes Friday, depending on how my week goes. All right. Now, the conditions that allow me to do my best work is that I have set up my workspace that even if I come in at 5 a.m., I can turn on my camera. I can open up Ecamm and I can start recording. That is the conditions that allow me to have my best work to emerge. Now, what depletes me is 12 p.m. because once I've started my day so early, I know that I have a peak from 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's when I'm going to do all my creative work. That's when I'm going to be fresh and the ideas and everything will be flowing. Also, after 12 p.m., I know I'm going to be depleted. And so I start closing off my day. So I'm not saying that this is a rigid formula, but your capacity is going to shift by season and by week and by what else is happening in your everyday life. But having a working understanding of what you can actually give versus what you imagine you can give is the foundation of every single thing. So this week, I want you to track your actual creative output for 7 days, not the hours work, but the quality output. When did you produce your best work? When were you just filling time? What does that tell you about your real capacity? All right, the next thing is structural flexibility. One of the things I've always said when I started my business is that my business needs to be working around or designed around my everyday life. And so a sustainable system bends without breaking. It needs to be flexible when life be lifing. So here is something that took me a few years to really get down to being flexible and working for me is that rigidity is not strength. In a business, rigidity is a fragility. Right? It means one unexpected event, a sick day, a family season, a creative dry spell can knock the whole thing off the rails. If I take 2 weeks off, nothing will be operating because there is no structural flexibility. Now, what does structural flexibility mean? Structural flexibility means your systems are designed to accommodate real life without collapsing. Design your business, design your workflow to accommodate real life. It means that your content workflow has a minimum viable version and a full version. You can drop the minimum viable when you need to without losing all of your everyday momentum or your weekly momentum. It also means that your revenue has a baseline that doesn't require a perfect month to hit. It means your schedule has genuine space that isn't immediately populated by tasks the moment something opens up. The rigid creator breaks when life bends. I'll say that again. The rigid creator breaks when life bends. They are so focused and they're so rigid with their structure that if something happens, everything falls away. It's hard for them to stay. Their system is not flexible. And so the flexible creator and the creator who has a flexible structure bends with it and it comes back without having to rebuild from scratch. A lot of times when we're so rigid with our systems and we're so rigid with our structure, the minute something goes left, we have to start all over again. And that is not sustainability. That is you just keep repeating a cycle over and over again. And so I want you to look at your current workflow and ask what is your minimum viable version of this? When you can only show up 20% because life is lifing, would the system still be flexible enough to work with your 20% attention or with no attention at all? If you've never defined that, this week is going to be a good time to start thinking about it. Now, the other thing is I call the replenishment rhythms. What refills you has to be as scheduled as what depletes you. This is the one that gets cut first when things get busy. The walk, the reading, the prayer time, the creative input that isn't for the business. It's just for you. The rest that isn't recovery from exhaustion, but actual nourishment and refreshing before you need it. I want to be real specific here because replenishment and refilling sounds like a spa day, and that's not what I'm talking about. That replenishment rhythm are the regular, recurring practices that keep you full enough to keep creating. And I don't even want to say full enough, but full and you are creating from that overflow. For some people, that's a morning hour of quiet before anybody else wake up. For others, it's a weekly artist day, just going somewhere and being curious without an agenda. Sometimes it's working outside of the office once per week. Sometimes it's just spending an entire day of doing absolutely nothing. No, you're not dealing with life. You're just laying there and you are just blocking out the distractions and just being present. Whatever it is for you, it needs to be on your calendar with the same non negotiable status as your client work. Because the second it becomes optional, it is gone. And when it's gone long enough, so is your creativity. So I want you to name one replenishment rhythm you have or you want to put on your calendar this week, not when I have the time. I will schedule it on my calendar because it is a non negotiable, it is a must. I always tell people you cannot pour into others if you are empty. That is just empty noise going into their cup. And so the next thing I have always been an advocate for is the long game matrix. Sustainable businesses, and I have picked up this practice from running an IT department in corporate. What I've understand is that sustainable businesses measure what matters over time and not the spikes in this particular moment. Here is what I mean by this. A lot of creators matrix is designed around reward virality, the views, the reach, the following spikes. And yes, those numbers are not meaningless, but they're terrible indicators of sustainability because they measure moments and not forward momentum. The long game matrix is going to look different. They track, are your best listeners coming back? Is your email list growing slowly but consistently? Is your revenue baseline moving up and not spiking, but it's moving? Is the quality of your work getting better over time? Am I building relationships with my audience or just audience for my content? The creator who obsesses over a viral moment and ignores a slow build matrix is making a category error. They're optimizing for the sprint when they're in a marathon, and you always hear this. Creators are in a marathon, and most times we are doing sprint when we're supposed to be focusing on the marathon. And so sustainable growth is often invisible. And so one of the things that I have realized is that sustainable growth is often those invisible things week to week. It's super slow. It's those compounding efforts that you put in that sprint based growth never will. I want you to write down 3 metrics that you currently track. Then ask, do these measure momentum or do they measure moments? If they only measure moments, what would a momentum matrix actually look like for your business, for your creative work? I want you to remember that a sustainable creator is not the creator who has it all figured out. It's not the one who never struggles, never doubts, never has a season where the systems feel strained. or the capacity is low. The sustainable creator is the one who keeps coming back. And that is the important thing. That is the whole thing, actually. In Isaiah 40:31, it says that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Run and not grow weary, walk and not faint. I've always been struck by that sequence, the soaring, the running, and then the walking. Because most of us want the soaring season. We want the wings, the momentum, the feeling that it's all working together. But sustainability is often in the walking season, the consistent, unspectacular, the faithful, everyday kind of building where you show up not because you feel inspired, but because you know your work matters, where you tend the systems even when they feel invisible, where you replenish even when there's pressure to produce. The walking season is not a lesser version of the soaring season, it's a season that makes the soaring possible. That's what this whole conversation is about. Walking well, building for the long game, designing a creative life that can carry you not just the quarter, but the next decade and beyond. All right, before we go, I want you to remember this: sustainability isn't a destination you arrive at, it's the way you travel. Start designing it now, not after the next launch, not when things slow down, but today. I'm Elisha, and this is how we create a flow.